Hey, what's up guys? Thanks for stopping by the channel. So for this video, we're going to be taking a look at the newly released Grand Seiko SBGP017, also nicknamed the Sea of Clouds, based on this gorgeous light blue dial. Now, this Grand Seiko is also a 55th anniversary, harkening back to the 44 GS case design, which was done in the late 1960s, based on 9 core principles that gives this case its very angular and sharp looking design, and this is very well integrated into Grand Seiko's design language even to this day. Now, unfortunately, this watch is only a limited edition run of about 2,000 pieces worldwide, and it comes in at a price tag of around 4,900 Canadian dollars, which seems like a bit of a value given just how well executed the dial is, and you're getting the iconic 44 GS case. But one of the things that make it more affordable is that it's running a quartz movement. Now, granted, this happens to be an in-house 9F85 quartz caliber, finely tuned to only plus or minus 5 seconds of deviation per year, and they've even taken the extra step to show off this quartz movement through a display sapphire caseback, and it is very well decorated. And a subtle advantage to having this watch run a quartz movement inside the 44 GS case is that it now sits much lower on the wrist, so it's fairly thin and sits flat in profile on the wrist. I really do find this watch very comfortable on this nice custom shell cordovan leather strap, but it also wears extremely well on the factory OEM bracelet that's provided. So why don't we flip perspectives now, and you guys can actually check out this Grand Seiko Sea of Clouds up close in the studio. Alright, so let's get up close and personal with the Grand Seiko Sea of Clouds here. And what I'd like to do is go over the basic dimensions for this timepiece, and then we'll go into some of the nice specs. So to my calipers, I do measure this at a 40mm case diameter. If you flip the watch over to the side profile here, the lug-to-lug span between my thumbs right now, I get 46.2mm. In terms of thickness, this watch is only 10.8 millimeters thick. That's from the bottom of a screwed in and sapphire display caseback to the top of the ever so slightly domed front facing sapphire crystal that carries Grand Seiko's super clear coating. So note that even under harsh studio lights, you don't get a lot of reflections, and this watch is extremely legible, which I really appreciate. Now, like pretty much all 44 GS cases, the lug opening for the OEM bracelet is an annoying 19 millimeters. I really wish that they just made it an even 20 millimeters. That would go a lot better with the hordes of 20 millimeter straps I currently own. That said, the bracelet is nicely constructed. You can see very fine brushing on the top of the links with intermediate polishing running down the center links. There's even some very nice fine bevels as you transition to the side of the bracelet, which is highly polished. Note the use of slot screws on either side of the bracelet to size to your wrist. You can see you do get half links with this bracelet. Regrettably, the clasp is fairly basic and doesn't carry anything in the way of micro adjustment. But that being said, it's quite thin and comfortable. It's a twin trigger releasing mechanism, and you can see that the swing arm is nicely milled out. So here's a quick in-studio wrist shot just to show you how well this Grand Seiko Sea of Clouds wears on a 7.5-inch wrist. That's 19 centimeters in circumference if you're going with the metric system. And the key aspect I want to show is if you look down the barrel, you can just see how low in profile this watch sits on my wrist. And most mechanical 44 GS case Grand Seikos have a protrusion on the case back, so it sits a little bit higher than it should, in my opinion. This watch is also quite comfortable, and sized up for my wrist comes in a nice healthy 136 grams. So it is good for all day wear. And of course, this thing is an absolute strap monster, assuming you can get 19mm straps. Alright, so if you're buying a Grand Seiko, odds are you really like the subtle details, and this is where Grand Seiko does excel with respect to just the finishing and complexity of their dials, and as well as on the case. So with the Sea of Clouds dial, it's very fine, and at a macro level, I can't find any flaws, dust particles, or anything that shouldn't be there. So Grand Seiko does an excellent job, even at the sub $5,000 price range. The dial has a very fine, almost brush stroke texture to it to give it that cloud-like appearance, which I really, really enjoy. The hour markers are highly polished and faceted, and you can see how they're applied onto the dial as almost simple batons, with a double index at the 12 o'clock for orientation. At the 3 o'clock position, you have a very nicely framed date wheel, and you can see it's nicely stepped down with a white date disc with black text to give you good legibility to read the day of the month. And with this particular model, it's the subtle details that really get to me. One, I love the thermally blued tipped seconds hand that just gives a nice pop of color to go along with the dial. And also the G and S logo are nicely applied in blue, and I do think those are thermally blued etchings for the applied GS, which is kind of cool and you don't often see. I also like the position of the Grand Seiko Gold Star just above a 6 o'clock index. It's applied as well, and it's specifically reserved for their 9F quartz movements that have that enhanced accuracy of about 5 seconds per year. The running minute track is also a subtle detail that I really enjoy. When I compare it to, say, something like my Grand Seiko White Birch, which has a chapter ring and kind of looks a little bit cheap, I would rather them go with what they have done with a Sea of Clouds here and just have nice printed hash marks. Now, with respect to the in-house 9F85 quartz caliber, I mean, it is a thermocompensated quartz, so this watch has circuitry that actually checks the temperature of the watch thousands of times per day and adjusts the frequency of the quartz oscillation accordingly. I mean, you do get the double pulse system, so you can see how that seconds hand just snaps into place. And specific to the 9F85, which I really like, is that if you pull out the non-screw down crown to the first position, you can independently jump your hour hand and you're not hacking the movement, so you maintain the accuracy of that high torque and accurate quartz movement. So that way, if you're changing time zones or something, it's quite quick and easy to make an adjustment there. And then if you were to pull out the crown all the way, you will hack the movement and you can set precisely your minutes and seconds to any reference that you want. I am going to flip over the watch just to show you guys the very nicely decorated quartz movement through the display sapphire caseback. That was kind of a bold choice, and I really enjoy the fact that Grand Seiko did that. Now, if we move away from the dial, let's talk about the nice 44 GS case finishing here. So a characteristic hallmark of it is, of course, their hand polish or Zuratsu polishing that gives you kind of like a mirror-like a plane where you can really see strong distortion-free reflections. Now, one potential downside I do see to having so much of that Zuratsu finish on the top portion of the case here is that it does show scratches quite well. And the same is true for the highly polished conical bezel that's there. Flipping back over to the side, you can see that the mid case is actually nicely brushed, and it kind of helps you transition from the conical portion of the bezel, which is kind of sunken into the case, to the lower half of the case, which is also done with Zuratsu polishing. You can see that the crown is signed GS. I do wish that this was actually a screwed down crown. I don't know why it's non-screw down, because you basically set it and forget it with a quartz watch. Nevertheless, this is rated to 100 meters of water resistance given the push-pull crown. You can see that the crown is partially sunken into the case as well, so it is fairly protected from shocks. So that is my overview for this Grand Seiko Sea of Clouds. But as always, guys, I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments section of this review What are your thoughts on the Grand Seiko Sea of Clouds? And would you like to see more type of Grand Seikos with high accuracy 9F quartz movements inside? Now, if you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. It always helps me out. And as always, I can't wait to catch you guys in the next video.